I want everybody here to do something for me real quick. Think about the last handful of things that you bought for your business. The software, subscriptions, the tools that your team uses every single day. Now, ask yourself, how many times did somebody have to sell me on those? And if it's for me, as I go through the tools that I'm thinking of, it's almost none of them. None of the things that I use on a daily basis are things that somebody had to come sit me down and sell me on, which is great. So that being said, looking at what I use on a daily basis, my AI companion of choice is Claude. I started on ChatGPT because it was first and it was everywhere. But eventually I figured out that that wasn't right for me. So I switched. There was no Anthropic rep that called me, no discovery call. Nobody sat me down and said, Rob, here's why you need this for Westport Studios. I just bought it. I just switched things. Same thing with my project management tool here at my business. It's Asana. We've run our whole company on it since day one. Nobody had to walk me through a 12-week evaluation or a sit-down process or anything like that. I knew what we needed. I did the thing and I paid for it. Last example I've given you here, my wife, Katie, who has been in my life for the past 18 years, and we have a 6-month-old now, she wears one very specific brand of makeup. She wears Clinique, and that's because it is right for her skin. But you know how she figured that out? Years of trial and error of trying other makeups. No Clinique rep ever caught her in a department store or knocked on our front door. So here's my point. A whole lot of what we buy is transactional. Not all of what we buy is relational. So when we need the thing, we get the thing. Relationships would just slow us down for transactional objects. But here's the thing. The deals that actually change a company, 6-figure software suites, 7-figure marketing partnerships, the service that reshapes how your organization operates, those don't get bought with a 30-second visit to a web page. Those get bought from a person. And the most powerful way I've ever found it to become that person is, before you've ever pitched a single thing, is to put a microphone between you and the exact people you most want to work with. And that's what today is. Today is not go start a podcast. It's not even podcast build deep relationships. Like, that's part of it. You already know that. That is day one stuff. But today is the deeper cut. Today is about using your show as a sales discovery tool, a way to find, to qualify, and to earn the big relational deals that cold email and Google Ads are never going to get you. So if you sell something that's transactional and relatively inexpensive, got to be straight with you a little bit. This might not be a tool for you. If you sell something that is $8 a month that I can just click and go with, podcast for that might not be the right tool unless you've got volume. But if you sell something bigger, if you sell something relational, something that shapes how your customer does business, this is going to be a fun ride. So let's strap in and cover what we're going to learn today. First, we're going to learn about hunting the right game, making sure that having a show is even worth your time. And then when it is, making sure that your show is aimed at the guests that are worthy of your time to cultivate a relationship with. After that, we're going to reframe the episode as a discovery call in disguise. We're never deceptive about it, but it is a discovery call in disguise. Excuse me. And then third, we will walk the road from a great conversation to a qualified sales opportunity. And then we're going to finish out with something that almost no one teaches: how to run some interference with your own leadership so this thing survives long enough to actually work when it comes to having a podcast. Okay, let's talk about where this pays off and where it doesn't. I know some of you were here in April, and we looked at like paid advertising and things like that for in the beginning of that webinar. We're going to use the same example we did here, there. HVAC services. At the time, I just had my furnace fixed, and we looked for the most economical person to come and do that. Some keywords in the home services industry run $26 a click, And for an HVAC company, that can work really great because the work is transactional. My wife and I wanted somebody to come and take a look at the furnace. It did not matter who they were necessarily. You're not looking for this deep multi-year relationship with the guy who comes and goes, "Hey, Rob, do you know how to clean a heat sensor?" No. Okay, let me do that for you. So the number that matters, though, is that the average person spends about 54 seconds on a web page before they make a transactional decision. If you sell a six-figure relationship-driven product, you're not going to get that sale in 54 seconds unless you are the history's greatest salesperson. That's not going to happen. A great example of this is in a space that I touch frequently with some of the shows that I produce as a podcast producer at Westport Studios. Think about a mid-sized university. You've probably got one near you that is trying to fill its incoming freshman class for fall. Their marketing budget for the year to fill that class might be $250,000, $500,000, maybe more, somewhere 6-7 figures of budget. Nobody at that university picks an agency by going marketing agency near me in Google and puts their finger on one of them and picks it. Every school is different. Those differences are what makes them need a relational sale. They have to know who they're trusting with that large sum of money to get the marketing plan right. So that's the floor for everything we're doing today. If your product is high ticket, complicated, relational, or honestly just more than something you can just pull off a shelf, a podcast can become your biggest secret weapon. If it's a $29 one-size-fits-all course, you got to think bigger or use a different tool. I'd rather tell you now that your product may not fit a podcast, especially if it's low dollar value, than have you waste the rest of your year on a budget that won't pay off. So you will not find a six-figure relationship in almost every case within that 54 seconds. And we're going to look at a little bit more of why that is here now. All right, before we do, grabbing a quick poll here. Kate, our producer, is going to pop that up. Want to figure out a little bit more about where everybody's products and services lie here. What best describes the typical deal size at your company? Got 4 options there. Transactional for under $5,000, mid-size or hybrid 5 to 50, high ticket relational stuff for 50 to 100, or is this like enterprise, super complex, multiple decision makers involved at 6 figures plus per year or per deal? So let that go for just a little bit longer here.
Hey, Rob, I have a question.
Yeah, by all means.
Is that initial because we're residual and they pay us on a monthly basis for years? So how do I answer this?
Sure. Lifetime value of customer would be probably a great way to look at that. So if you charge somebody like I do, for example, most of my customers pay me about $5,000 a month. They're 60 G's a year, and many of them have been with me for 4 or 5 years. I don't know my full lifespan of a customer yet because people haven't all left, which is great. But I would say most of these things, if you have the average customer lifespan of 4 years and they pay you $20,000 a year, I'd put you right square in that high ticket relational for $80,000 in that case. Does that help?
Yeah, you're just making me do math, but I got it. Thanks.
The most evil thing in the world at mathematics.
No.
Anyway,
I do it for fun sometimes, just checking.
That's all right. Well, it looks like, and we'll end this here, which is good. Not everybody in there, and that's okay. Some of you may not have something that is represented on there 100%. Maybe you got 7-figure deals. I don't know. But we do have kind of a nice little bell curve there of folks who have hybrid size deals and then a high ticket and then a transactional. So good to spread that around here. A lot of this is built again more towards the higher, but at the same time, if you are in A and sometimes the low end of B, there's a ton that still applies to you here. So we're going to keep on moving. The next thing I want to put on your radar here is hunting the right game. I want you to think about this, about if you have a podcast and you're thinking about starting one. I want to use a hunting analogy, which is funny because I'm a guy from Wisconsin and I don't hunt. The Upper Midwest, for some reason, we just never hunted in my family, but stick with me here because this actually works. I want you to picture 4 tiers of game that you can find in my state. You've got squirrels, you've got turkeys, you've got white-tailed deer, And I had to look this up. There are actually elk in the state of Wisconsin. There are two herds. You can absolutely go hunting for squirrels and eat them and things like that. But you can also, if you put this to a business analogy, you can make a living hunting squirrels as your business's primary source of income and energy. These are your small clients. They don't do repeat business. There's a million of them. They're easy to find. They don't usually put up much of a fight or challenge. But by the end of the day, a squirrel doesn't feed you for very long. You might have to eat two or three to feel full. That's your low ticket transactional customer. A lot of them, they're easy to get, and there's just not a lot of meat on the bone. So, looking at the other end of the spectrum, an elk is a difficult thing to tackle. And I have to apologize here. The mountain for the elk, they didn't have like antlers. You know, I have a tail for the white-tailed deer, but they didn't have an antlers icon there. So we'll go with a mountain. But the elk is taking real effort. And even if you know anything about large animals like that, it can be even dangerous to approach them. You better know what you're doing. But one elk, man, if you take down an elk, you are eating good for probably a year. It can be actually over 350 pounds of meat in one creature that you can freeze, preserve, all sorts of things. But that's your big relational organization shaping deal. So here's the question I want everybody from that analogy to take a moment to reflect on. Does your business let you hunt for those critters at the top two levels, the deer and the elk? B2B podcast tools are incredible hunting tools to go after big game. If your business is fueled by smaller transactional deals, a podcast as a sales and marketing tool is maybe a play that you consider way down the road when you're mature and you have tons of customers. But if you are looking to manage a number of deals that are in the relational tier of things, that is where this really, really shines. You want to hunt your big game with a big gun. Stop using it to blast squirrels. On the topic of getting things bigger here, back in March, we talked about a concept of mine that's original to me called guest ELO. To explain what ELO is, it's basically a ranking system that's used in like competitive chess. But it makes players play at the level that they belong at. This is kind of the flip side of that coin of playing at the level you belong at. When you're a host, every guest you book for a podcast is a choice about what potential customer you're setting yourself up to hunt. Don't book squirrels. I know they are great people. They are nice. They will say yes in a heartbeat. But if you want to invite the game that makes you go places, if you want to invite the fish that makes you buy a bigger boat, that's what you need to do. The ones who are, if a real relationship formed, they would genuinely move the needle for your business, and they're a great fit for you culturally. Back in May, we talked about how your show title was your targeting. Same idea here, but one level up. Your guest list is also involved in your targeting. Every person who you invite onto a podcast should be, number one, someone you're thrilled to work with. Number two, an ideal 8 or 9 on a scale of 10 plus fit customer, and should be somebody who makes sense to court with time invested with them one-on-one. So in section 2 here, we're going to talk about that pivot to a discovery call in disguise. So we did a bunch of analogies just a moment ago about blasting squirrels and making sure you hunt the right game and things like that. Let's structure this into what it needs to be for podcasts, because at the end of the day, a podcast episode can be a sales discovery call in disguise. And it's quite possibly a better use of your time than almost anything else on your calendar to land excellent fit clients with bigger budgets. Here's why. Think about what happens when you sit down to interview with someone for 30, 40 minutes. There's a pressure to perform. You both want to be good because you both have skin in the game. I'm not going to call that like a trauma bond, but it's a stressor. It's a stressor in a good way. You're in this together. The goal of a good B2B podcast is to do something that a demo never can. Show you who someone really is and give them a non-sales motivated look at you as well. It's an entire vibe check ecosystem. In one conversation, you get to qualify a prospect. And just as importantly, disqualify a prospect potentially. You find out what it's actually like working with this person when you're making a podcast with them, and whether their problems that they may discuss, because they are supposed to be your ideal customer, are ones you can solve, and whether there's something to be gained by continuing the relationship beyond the time where recording hits stop. You're vetting them, they're vetting you, and the best part is nobody has to sit through a sales pitch to do it. So let's talk about interview magic here. Let's talk about why the podcast builds a relationship faster than you'd think, and why you should be looking, if you run your own show, to do things in kind of this way. So, quick story about why podcasts build relationships faster than you'd ever think is from a number of years ago. Early in my career as a producer, I had a customer by the name of Brendan. Great guy. And he ran an ed tech show. And he was also early in his podcasting journey. He was on episode 6 or so of his show. But as with most shows, the first few guests that he had were what I call friendlies, people you can afford to screw up with. You know, if the feed cuts or your mic drops out or you knock your microphone off the table, they're going to give you a pass because they know you already. A lot of times for podcasts, this can be business friends, current customers, people who will cut you slack because they know you. Now, the person we're going to talk about was one of his first true guests, no prior relationship whatsoever. Now, I'm a big believer in a pre-interview, getting to know people a little bit more before you hit record, because the real magic in a podcast is seeing someone for the second time. Meeting someone again just a few days later is a huge impact. Now, be sure to take your regular recording and your pre-interview and space them apart a couple days for maximum effect. Brendan conducted a pre-interview, and it went fairly well from what he told me. But here's the thing, it only felt like it went well. So on the day of his actual recording, the guest, who we're going to call Amy at this point in time, Amy comes on, Brendan hits record, and she replies to his opening welcome to the show statement by getting his name wrong. His name is Brendan. She calls him Brandon right out the gate, and she does it in this tone that could have just sucked all the energy right out of the room. But despite that, Brendan pushed forward and was smart enough and trained enough to move forward with the interview without missing a beat, and turned that low energy upwards with her, and eventually had a fantastic conversation. 31 minutes later, starting from the bottom, every second of that interview was built to spend moving upwards. By the time they were done, they were laughing at each other's jokes. They had built a relationship. The magic is here, though. When that episode wrapped, Brendan felt comfortable enough to say, "Hey, Amy, when we started, you actually called me Brandon. Do you mind if we re-record that intro?" She lit up, both mortified and laughing, and said, "I am so sorry, Brendan. I totally botched that. I came in here with just not the right amount of energy. Let's do it. Let's fix it." They cut a new intro. It was night and day from the original. 31 minutes from a flubbed name and low energy to a genuine relationship. You don't find that from an email thread, and you don't get it from a sales demo. You get it from sitting down and making something together. So the epilogue to that is that after that conversation, Amy happened to be a key customer for Brendan, and she worked for Vanderbilt University, one of the top prospects for Brendan's company. And he was targeting them, but couldn't really get his foot in the door. Because they had the relationship they built on the podcast, Amy scheduled a meeting to install Brendan's company data solution for Vanderbilt, because the relationship built with her led to an introduction to the school's chief technology officer, the exact person that Brendan needed to meet to get a deal with them moving. That is a very interesting way to get your business done and closed. So here's the thing. You can leave all of that to chance. Brendan didn't. What he did was he started to design for it. You can design podcast episodes with your pipeline in mind. This is the big meaty part of this segment here. And I don't mean turning shows into a sales trap. That's not what this is. Yeah, you're having conversations with your ideal customer as a guest. You'd love to see a deal come out of this. But what I mean that you need to do is you need to create a show that is intentional. The order you bring guests on, the topics you choose, the story arcs that you tell with your B2B podcast. So here's a couple of the biggest secret points that make pipeline work with topic selection. Number one, pick topics that naturally surface the pain points that you happen to be really good at solving. If you sell something that fixes a specific problem, build the episode around that problem and let your guests talk about it. Don't railroad on this, but don't railroad them on this. But if your company sells a $250,000 plus marketing service for universities, to continue that analogy from before, it might help to have folks who can talk about what they've done in the past to market their universities on your show if that's what your niche is. But don't dive into that just yet. That's something of a later challenge. The next thing I want you to think about for a B2B podcast is the idea of a content guest. A content guest is somebody who shows off the way something has been successful at one organization. For example, a college that had a great marketing program to grow its student body and allows your listeners, who are also potentially your ideal customers, to apply it to their companies. Keeping going with that example of a university marketing agency from before I was talking about that podcast there, large universities like in the Big Ten and Pac-12 are likely running some really highly successful campaigns for their school. If you ran a marketing podcast for higher ed professionals showcasing somebody from University of Wisconsin, Purdue, pick your big name school that you follow the college football team of, showcasing someone like them on your podcast about higher education marketing makes a ton of sense because your audience may be having enrollment challenges just like that big school did. And if you can offer a service, remember, you're a higher ed marketing agency, you're in that role right now. If you can offer a service that right sizes what they just heard from the big guys on your show, you've got a winning recipe. Had a show that did that. They did wonderfully with that and still going strong, which is great. Number 3, your show's job is to showcase the expertise of your guests to the industry. When you open this up from a standpoint of I need to get customers to I need to showcase this to my industry and pick topics that people can excel at, that is an amazing reason of like why they should work with you. Uncovering what matters to them in an interview and conducting an interview around their expertise, what is going to make you have the traction to do these larger deals, because the business will come out of that push, that enlightenment, and that spotlighting of your guests in this case. And then last but not least, when it comes to your podcast and getting things going forward, plan your content in advance. So many people do what are we talking about this week? And they don't even know until they hit the record button. But have an overarching goal for each block of episodes, even if it's just a handful of them. Both short-term and long-term, give people a reason to come back and see where your narrative goes. So many folks are looking to start a podcast, and they get this wrong because they're focusing on, I need to sell this product or service, rather than building a relationship that will pay off later. The one thing that I want to stress, and this is going to come back later in this presentation, is that B2B podcasting is a long game. And if you try to play it short, if you try to trim it, you will get burnt badly. So we're going to take a moment here to recap the first half of things here. Let everybody digest what we went over here. Again, a brain break more than anything. How to structure a show, conducting interviews, getting folks into that trusting space, and more importantly, keeping ourselves in that trusting space. We know we're talking to the right folks, especially because chances are, if you're doing this, you're pulling your guest list from your CRM and finding a way to talk to them in the right way so that they say, huh, I had a really great experience with so and so on their podcast. They can fix a problem I have. Maybe I should talk to them about that. So we'll take questions around what we've covered so far, and then we're going to pivot to qualifying those opportunities and moving those forward here as well in the second half. So let me take a look at the chat here. Nothing out there, but if you want to demute, unmute, raise your hand, whatever it might be, we'll be in good shape. Any questions so far? If not, we will move right ahead as well. Ooh, hang on here. It's 7 new messages. Oh, okay. That's all of them. Good. All right. We're going to ask one more time. Any questions on anything we've just covered?
So, Rob,
Tom, go
thank
ahead.
you for offering the questions. I guess the thing that I'm pondering now that you say all that is you have prospects. They don't know who you are to start with. And trying to avoid, I know if you get these emails too, I get emails every other day or every day, 6 of them. My friend Joe saw you on, we want to have you on a guest because of this type of topic on our podcast. I don't want to sound like that because I get a million
Right.
of spam emails. But if I'm approaching a business where I don't know anybody in there, I recognize or I know enough about them from word of mouth or reputation and so forth that they could use some help in doing what I solve. What's your suggestion for breaking that ice other than the secondary referral? Hey, Bob, who knows Joe, can get me in the door or make an introduction, to this blind, hey, why do you don't even know me? Why do you want me on your show?
Right. And Tom, I think you picked up a really good thing. I've actually got a research project I'm working on that is collecting all of the podcast pitches I receive over the course of like 180 days. And it is amazing how accurately you described the, hey, Tom, we saw you on XYZ. We'd love to have you on ZYX. And you can just kind of smell how that's not there. And I actually investigated a few of these myself. I found one show that was making 8 episodes a day. Which I was stunned too, man. Like your face on that was perfect because I was like, okay, what is this? What have I stumbled upon? But the goal to go with that is to come across with a very if you don't know these folks, a lot of the biggest mistake I see people make when they're asking people to be on their podcast and they don't know them is that they feature dump. There's nothing worse than saying, "Hi, I'm Rob Conlon. I'm the founder of Westport Studios. Blah 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 blah. I went to school here. I was born here." Nope, nobody cares. I tell most people that their pitch for a podcast should be, "Hi, I'm Rob. I run B2B Business Class. That's my podcast. I happened across you. Like, where did I find you? How to get here in a very short way? And I'd like to have you on my show for X reason. Your expertise around digital marketing with email. Okay. And it's tailored specifically to them. Now, for you as the guest, the one thing that you can do if you are prospecting guesting for yourself is bring an idea for an episode. If you, Tom, say, I am, and again, be careful how you phrase this, if you are the world's greatest uh, email marketing pitch person, like find a way to say that is humble but intriguing in that case. And so the big
Yeah, I like the idea where you're going. I see that you guys have a great reputation for X and Y and Z, and I'd love to talk about that with my audience and have you share some stories of what's made you successful. So kill them with flattery.
But make sure it doesn't come across as flattery though.
Right.
Slight story time detour here for a moment. I had a customer who their ideal customer was the general counsel of a Fortune 500 company. So think of Exxon and Walmart and things like that. That was the person they were trying to get the head lawyer of those companies onto their show. And the thing that did it for them was saying to them, "Hey, John, Jim, Hassan, whatever their name was, I heard you guys are doing something really cool at insert company here. Do you want to come talk about that with us?" And the host dug into what is the really cool crap that you're doing at your place. And then the other part of that was, what's the really cool crap you wish you could do at your place? Their product, my customer's product, was a legal bidding software. And so that was one of those things where eventually the discovery, which we're going to go into the second half here, the discovery of that pain point of, man, I really wish I could control my legal budgets better. That's where their genuine interest, because they actually got a lot of cool people who were doing really cool stuff with, major legal departments. That's where they pivoted into bringing that forward. And it was very intriguing to see people whose time is worth, I think I did the math on this once, like $1,600 an hour, be like, yeah, I'll come to your podcast for free. So I hope that answers things for you, Tom. Anything else in there? All right. Awesome. Good stuff. Any other questions here? That was a really good, like, probably the best detour we've had in this, Tom. So I want to thank you for asking that. Again, it wasn't like off topic or anything like that, but you got me going in a couple places. So I really appreciate you for that, man. Are there any other folks out there who have a question about what we covered so far? We can definitely chat on that real quick. Otherwise, we will bounce right back into it, and I'll have to make sure I put the slides back up, which will be great. Going to give it an 8 count here. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. I think we're going to be going back to Sharon. Here we go. All right. Great pit stop, everybody. Here we go. Let's move to one of my new favorite concepts. I actually didn't have, for years, I didn't have a coined term for this, and I just came up with it a few months ago. Taking a conversation, kind of like Tom suggested, and twisting it in a good way into a qualified sales opportunity. So you've had a great conversation, you vetted each other, you vibe, there's all sorts of good things going on. Well, what happens now? How does that conversation become an actual opportunity? There were some of you here back in April when I introduced Pitch Pivot, which is what this topic is called. Going to go a little bit deeper in it today as a sales discovery move, because there is a moment to make an ask of your guest, but it's nowhere near the time where you hit record, either start or stop, except in very rare circumstances. The legal podcast I mentioned was actually one of those times where for that customer of mine, they had some real opportunities where they hit the stop button on that podcast, and they went, you guys said you spent $17 million on court costs last year. Can we help you lower that? Something along those lines. So, but here's the thing. Once you've earned the right to ask this of the people you build relationships with, it's because you listened. It's because you remember those things that they told you in the conversation about their business, the pain points. You're eventually going to step into a moment in the conversation where both you and they go, well, what would happen if we worked together? Right? So taking a look further into this, we do a follow-up daisy chain. This is a great concept here that is so critical to getting people from recording day to kind of part of your squad, if you will, to use a phrase there, from the guesting here. So the most important part that people fumble or move too fast on when it comes to this is not following up the right way. So the episode is the opening move. Obviously, you've reached out to this person, you've reached out to them, you've booked them, you've brought them onto your show. That's like step 1, maybe step 0 even. The episode is not the relationship. The relationship lives in the follow-up and what you do on a daily basis to engage with your guests after they've been guests. There's one thing I want to put in here as a major point that I think is a pain point for hosts and people who are looking at podcasting and things like that. This is something that doesn't scale very well. Following up and maintaining relationships with people is just, it takes effort. And yes, AI exists and things like that, and automations exist. There are some places where they do help with this, but at the end of the day, you kind of got to put the work in. So this daisy chain here has 5. It can be between 4 and 6 steps. Usually it's 5. In this case, sometimes you can cut something out, especially if it's closer to launch date, or whatever hits your unique situation there. So you look at the steps on here, how you follow up. Number 1, that person's on your guest. The first thing you're doing after recording, like the intro to your episode, is you're dropping a thank you note on them via email. Boom. You're going to also take a look at the pre-launch sync. How are you guys going to announce this to the world? That's one of the things I feel a lot of people really miss on. They get on a podcast, but they don't actually like coordinate and tell the rest of the world, like, hey, here's what's going on. That's a super important thing here as well. A go live day note to remind them if they haven't taken the steps from step 2 to take a look at that and shout it to their network. Step 4, game tape. One of the things that I don't think enough of us do, and I'm going to be watching this very recording later on today as I edit it and learn from it in this case. Review, listen your episodes as a way to reach back out to your customer. That's the big one that I don't see a lot of people doing is they're coaching themselves, but they're also saying to themselves in their head, I should encourage the person who was making this with me to listen to it, A, but B, it's also a great reason to reach back out. It is a great excuse to reach back out to them. And eventually this all leads to the pitch pivot, the one thing that says, should we work together? But you have to put in the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even more beforehand. So this is kind of where AI and automation earns its keep. I love having a queue that tells me, hey, send this thank you note today and let this person know that this is going live today. The guided stuff for that is fabulous, but don't let the relationship get built with your bots. Let people be people. Let people talk to you, because at the end of the day, people buy people and they will eventually buy you. So on that note, people buy you. Yeah, that's the whole game. In 2026, people buy people for non-transactional businesses. If we think back to how I opened this, how many things do we go from an automated ad, whether it's on your streaming service, whether it's on your computer, whether it's on your phone, you tap the thing or you click the thing with your remote and you just buy it. Amazon does it, all sorts of things like that. Many of the things that we just want, we just get because that's the awesome future that we live in. So when there are things that we can't just get, that's where this gets really interesting. When I left my first podcast agency back in 2022, which was a company that taught me a whole lot about how I did and did not want to run a business, a number of my customers came with me to my own company here, Westport Studios. And I will be very honest with you at that point. I don't think our product was better than what they were receiving with their former agency they were with. And if I'm really looking at it, I think it might have actually been an inferior product. But those clients came over anyway. Why? Because they bought me. They trusted that I had the best ability for their show to grow in mind. And that's not me trying to brag or say, oh yeah, Rob's the greatest podcast producer ever. No, the lesson in there is that people will overlook a lot if you've earned their trust and treat them like a human being. Now, that doesn't mean that you should take that long term. My old CEO and mentor is a man by the name of Tim Schmidt. I'm actually seeing him next week for the first time in a number of years. And since then, I've become a dad and gotten much more successful than the last time he saw me, which is great. But he taught me that kindness and treating people like people will carry you through the moments when things go a little sideways, and that people are often willing to cut you a lot of slack if they like you. Now, I want to mention here to tie this up in a like, oh, Rob, do you sell something that's like just not great? No. Since 2022, we've made tremendous progress on our customers' podcasts. All of the most basic of them have received transformations over the past 4.5 years. And that trust that they gave me at the beginning has been repaid, vindicated, built many, many times over. But the point I wanted to get to you across through this particular story here is that it took over a year of me working with those customers every single day to earn that trust at my first agency. Now, you don't have to put that many reps in with each podcast guest. That would be kind of honestly insane. But you do need to have that plan to communicate with them over an extended period of time post-interview. In 2026, companies are cramming AI into everything to go faster, harder, cheaper, drive things downward. And in their rush to do that, a lot of them are quietly and sometimes not so quietly throwing away the one thing that actually drives longevity and keeps customers: human relationships. That's the gap for your podcast. That's your opening to exploit. And a podcast is the most natural way to walk right into that hole and fill it for people. Your goal is to take your guest list and make it into a refined, personalized hot list of the very best SQLs, sales qualified leads, that you could ever hope for. A list of people who like you, know you, trust you. And if you sell a product that runs low or mid 5 to low 6 figures, a small handful of deals with something like this can make the ROI on a B2B podcast quickly move into that 3 to 5x range and way up. But the whole reason you do any of this is because the art of getting to know people is dying in the common spaces of life. And people in business and your personal life are literally starving for relationships because the electronics have dulled the very real and very human desire to connect meaningfully with conversations and thoughts. So lean on this going forward, letting people buy you. It's what's going to make the difference down the road, but it takes time. And that's why this next section is super important, because you need time for this to make a difference. And as I just said a moment ago, everything's going harder, faster, and cheaper because of AI. And people in positions of power at organizations oftentimes see that as the path forward. So let's look at how to put up a few defensive zones on this side to run a little interference, especially when the folks who aren't 100% invested in what we know is important, relationship building, come knocking. It's my favorite part of the presentation. We're going to take a moment here, though. Before we jump in, we have another question here. All else equal, 50 highly engaged podcast listeners will outperform 5,000 passively engaged listeners when it comes to creating podcast revenue. Real quick, true or false? Couple in there. Only 2 answers. True or false? 50 highly engaged listeners will outperform 100 times that many unengaged listeners. Are they super soldiers? Is each one of them worth 100 men? We'll see. All right, we're going to close this out here in 5, 4. There we go. We're in good shape. Thank you, Kate. So yes, those of you that answer true are absolutely correct. A small, motivated niche audience is the way to go when it comes to the building relationships in 2026. So we talked about needing to run some interference with leadership. And I want to talk real quick about the thing that quietly kills more good B2B podcasts than anything else out there: your own company's leadership. So here's what happens. You start a show, quarter goes by, and somebody in the C-suite, maybe it's CEO, maybe it's CFO, maybe it's a CMO, asks, so how many downloads did we get? And you give them a number. And I promise you, that number will never impress them. And that's because downloads are the wrong scoreboard for a relational sales tool. That's because executives think in quarters. With a podcast, a B2B podcast, you can't. It's a long game. And not only that, it's a long game with a niche audience. In reality, if you have your B2B podcast dialed in really well, the great number of downloads your business leaders seek might be mathematically impossible. If we go back to our earlier example about Brendan's show in EdTech, his company specializes in tying university systems together when they merge or when they add something new to their tech stack, and they exclusively serve colleges who need this type of data management and migration. But if you look at the number of colleges there are in America and just the United States, there's only 5,800 colleges potentially that qualify as a customer for him. If his leadership is asking him to generate 4 or 5 figure downloads every single week for every episode, there literally are not that many people out there who are in your industry to listen to that show. So you may only be able to muster a few hundred downloads at the very best situation, but those downloads are going to be people who are dead set into your niche and need your positioning and your expertise on what they're doing in the podcast world or with their business. So if download's the only thing your C-suite is measuring, you are literally handing them boxes and boxes of ammunition to kill your podcast before it even starts to work. So if we continue to look at other KPIs here, the this isn't working statement is the one thing that you need to get beyond. You need to provide the quality of listener rather than the quantity. And that's where human aspects come into play, and why you need to make sure that your C-suite understands the depth of a relationship that can come from these highly engaged guests and listeners. These are people who are more likely to convert than anybody else in your funnel, rather than just passively observing your content on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever else it may be. So the big thing I want you to take away from this section is what I'm calling a relationship ledger. This is where you measure these things with your C-suite, and you set these out beforehand so that they're not asking you other things, and you stick to these KPIs. This is what is going to be critical for you when it comes to assessing value to your C-suite with your B2B podcast. So what you measure instead, starting from day one, not 6 months in, you can't change this. And when somebody suddenly asks, oh, what have we gotten from this? You have an answer. The single best question that I know to ask yourself as a podcast host, and something I ask as a producer, is what business relationships came from the show this quarter? You're in two things there. A, you are thinking quarterly, like your C-suite likes you to, or like your leadership likes you to. B, you're thinking relationally. You're kind of speaking both languages at once. The other piece of it is who got added to this pipeline because of the conversation we had on mic, what deals move forward, and what doors opened from cold out, or that doors opened for us that we could never get to with cold outreach. Those are the questions you should be asking and tracking. You have to track this because it's not dollars and cents. These are a leading indicator. And you need to shout the really good stuff early about this, about, man, I just got off the phone with so-and-so from the podcast we had a few weeks ago. He had some questions about, what we talked about and things like that. You need to shout those things from the rooftops for your leadership. Compiling your wins for them before they come asking is the way to preempt this. If you set up the expectation that this is a relationship engine and not a download machine, you're buying yourself the runway that this kind of project actually needs. And you're going to run interference for your show long enough so that it actually lives to make the money and the ROI that it can and that you deserve and that your company deserves. So keep tabs on people as they progress through your pipeline. When their deal converts or closes, note the first touch attribution. If you have a podcast guest who is fresh to your pipeline, stake your claim on that person. Like that doesn't belong to sales. That's yours. When they convert, the business and your leadership should give you major credit for that, even if it's only partial. But a $100,000 deal that is started by your show and eventually closed by sales needs to have a reassurance from your leadership that it counts towards the ROI of your podcast. Otherwise, they're doing it wrong. So outlining to your leadership how they're going to recognize the following situations before you launch a show is critical. They're on screen right now. New leads. How much credit do you get for adding someone to your sales pipeline if someone else closes the sale? Is it 50%? Is it 20%? Whatever works for you guys. Just don't let it be 0% or a pittance. 20%, I'd almost say is too low. I really would. The second thing, existing leads. How much credit do you get if you go through your CRM and pick out great guests from there and advance those deals to a closing stage or get a customer to re-engage? What is that worth? That is something, again, don't accept a pittance on these. How you got them interacting with your organization and their content and your content again, that is a major win, especially for accounts that you're going to be dealing with. And then last but not least, your own closes. Make sure you can secure 100%, if not very close to 100% of the ROI from agreements that you close, especially if it's a cradle to closed lead. Getting it through your leadership's collective heads that downloads don't necessarily count, and that the relational advantages and advancements you make with your show are what should be tracked is super key for a podcast of any size with any business. And this can be harder than it looks because leadership thinks in quarters. In the podcast world, we don't. So last but not least, we're walking away with a couple things here, bringing it home. The 4 things that you're bringing out of here. Number 1, hunting the right game. Aim your shows at customers who are actually worth your time. You got a big old elk rifle. Don't waste it on squirrels. Number 2, treat the episode as a discovery call in disguise. 30 to 45 minutes on a mic tells you more and builds more than any sales demo ever could because nobody's being pitched. Number 3, conversation is the opening move. The opportunities for your business live in the follow-up, in the human relationship with the daisy chain. Listen for your opening. Make that pitch pivot when you've earned it. And lastly, 4, measure the right thing. Downloads are the wrong scoreboard. Track the relationships and be furiously diligent about this. I think that's the what I'd want to use here is that you need to be just like incredibly protective about that and showing every move you're making with the podcast. Last but not least, I want to put together a little analogy here that I go back to this more than any other. I want you to picture a watering hole on the African savanna. Got it in your mind? Everything comes to it. The gazelle, the zebra. You might find hippos in it. Even crocodiles. And in a drought, especially in a drought, every living thing in that savanna ecosystem shows up because they need that water to survive. That is what your show can be for your industry. It's not just a content channel. It's a watering hole. It is a place where everybody in your world comes to because what you're offering, real conversation, real wisdom, real human connection, is in such short supply right now, just like a drought. Knowledge is cheap in 2026. Wisdom is rare, and wisdom only comes from people. I've said that before. So build your watering hole, hunt the right game, treat people like people, and the pipeline, well, that'll take care of itself. So a lot of what makes this work, how to show up on the mic and how to position to the pivot and everything like that, and how to pitch yourself, not just for your own show, but for, if you want to guest on things, that's big and that's key. We want to show you more of that if you're interested. We built our Pitch Lab course. If you are looking to get on more podcasts and things like that, or you can reverse it to get people booked onto your podcast. When you schedule a B2B podcast, guest curation is a tough thing. And we talked earlier about who to schedule and what to talk about and offering more. And what we're offering now is more to help you with this goal of if you have an existing show or if you want to be on an existing show. So Pitch Lab, which is one of our wonderful products, is not a booking service. It's not a spray and pray email machine, but it's for people who want to get intentional about this. Everyone here is going to get the first couple of modules in their inbox at no charge as a part of our follow-up from this webinar. And if you do decide that it's something that you're really interested in and want the full course, there is a code on screen there. I'm from Milwaukee, and we have tons of dive bars here, so we play the dive bars, as my past presentations have said. But that'll take 15% off the list price, and as just a thank you for spending an hour with us here. I and some of the team here that helps support this are going to be hanging around here for QA till probably about 10 after 1. If we might wrap it up sooner if folks are quiet. But I just want to thank you all for being here, everybody. Thank you so much. Go build something real, whether you have a show or not. But when you do, make sure you go build relationships.
Hey, Rob, I've got a question for you.
Go ahead, my friend. What's on your mind?
So, in tracking the right and measuring the right things, one of my questions comes from, sometimes you alluded to the fact that the C-suite doesn't really understand what should be measured that actually gets you traction. So who are the stakeholders? Because in some companies, there will be multiple stakeholders that will have access to data, and each piece of that data is part of that path to build the bridge from podcast to results. And so could you talk a little bit about the stakeholders that should be engaged in order to bring that together?
Yeah, I think it's everybody who's going to touch revenue. And depending on the size of the company, you might be a small company, like myself. Again, I have a team of, I'm going to sit down here for a second because I've been standing the last hour, but I have a team of, if we can get the desk down, I have a team of four that work with me, as well as a couple other folks, like Laney Belcastro, who I know is out there in the audience, and Annette. I know you help us out a little bit too. But for these smaller organizations, whoever touches the revenue 100%, that might just be one guy like me in this case. But if we step up to, say, a 20-person organization, or maybe let's go 50-person organization, because you probably got a VP or two in there. You might have to rope in the head of marketing, the head of sales, and maybe the VP of, a CRO or whatever it might be. Finding those kind of the heads of everybody who could have a stake in this and getting them all into one place at once, I think is going to be the key there, to say, what are the things that you three need to see from us? And as an organization grows, I don't really think it gets more than maybe that 3 or 4 headed monster, because you're going to have somebody in those roles at that company. You might have a CMO at a organization that is 50 versus 500. You still probably only have one CMO, I'm guessing, in that case. So getting I would, if I had to name, without seeing a company or things like that, if I had to name the roles, I would get your VP of sales. I would get your VP, or whoever's in charge of sales, whoever's in charge of marketing, and then whoever is in charge of like big stuff, big deals or other initiatives. Those are the 3 things I would say. I would get those 3 aligned and then march from there and get them on the same page as, hey, I want to talk about how we can, move the needle, forgive the corporate speak there, but move the needle on what our business looks like. Because a lot of times deals from podcasts can be really actually transformative. We're in good shape there. So did that start to tie things together, or do I need to go
Yes,
further?
that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Awesome. Ha, Tom, I enjoyed your comment. It's too bad he's gone, the Brandon Rob. Good stuff. Other questions, comments, angry outbursts. Let's switch this into like a gallery mode here. I think that I can see everybody now a little bit more equal, which is great. Yeah, but Jeremy, thanks again for showing up. Karina, thank you. Tyrone, and Dakota, I didn't get a chance to greet you. Neither did I get a chance to greet you, Nick, but I'm just so happy y'all showed up, spent some time with us here. Questions, concerns. Again, I've got, I know our producer Kate has popped, where I saw my meeting link over there, which is the live event meeting link schedule, which is great. Jeremy, floor is yours, sir. What's on your mind?
Yeah, quick question. So I'm actually working with a solopreneur who is very much along the same lines as you are in terms of relationships, building relationships, and that's very important to him. He can be very good on in meetings and meeting with people in person. We're still experimenting with what he can do on camera in a podcasting sense. And I'm wondering if you have any particular suggestions about when it's time to think about other strategies, or how important it is to have that face of the organization involved in every aspect when it comes to a very small company like that.
Okay, yeah. Founder-led sales, that's one of those things where this really excels, I think. And that with small businesses, I oftentimes feel like that characteristic that I described, where like people will like you and buy you, like that really comes in handy, because there's you can do business with the mom and pop restaurant, or you can go to the chain. Like everybody kind of gravitates toward the mom and pop, unless you really like I don't know, I have Dave's Hot Chicken near me, and it's like, that's a chain, but it's amazing food, right? So that's where I see smaller companies oftentimes really lean on this. And I think one of the things that can be really advantageous for a small founder, if they have strengths, is to lean into what those strengths are. But if they have weaknesses, things like media training can be very, very useful to them. And it doesn't even have to be like necessarily formal media training. Like some of the posts I put up on LinkedIn, I did one a few months ago that had a grid of yellow lines and me making like a face with it. And it was all about framing yourself properly in a camera. And so I almost think working on some of the little things with a founder that can kind of be the table stakes for them is a great way to get them to sort of move along the lines of being, hey, I need to be the biggest hype man or hype woman for my business. And that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to use podcasts as that sort of, I don't want to say training ground, but a means to move that forward from practice. Because even if you look at somebody from episode 1 to episode 20, they carry themselves differently. So I guess, does that help in solving that? Okay, yeah, sure. If there's more, please let me know, and if I miss anything. But yeah, I think for many small time founders, honestly, podcasting is one of the best things they can do, because it does give them like almost informal media training to break bad habits and things like that. And especially if they watch their game tape. That's one thing that it's hard. I used to work in a contact center, and listening to my own calls was like, but I think I'm now immune to that. So it's fun. But yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Cool. Dakota, yes, there will be indeed a recording, which is great, and it'll be on YouTube. We'll send you the link. Lainey, who is in the room here, will have that all packed up into an email as soon as I get the files and get them onto YouTube. There'll also actually be, it just goes on a playlist, so you will be able to not just grab what we talked about today, but all of the other ones that we've done since March here. And if I do have to make, we're not taking anything away from today. Last month's was really fun. That has been my favorite, not favorite topic to talk about so far, but I think that'd be worth visiting for everybody here on how podcast answer engine optimization is working in 2026. I learned so much from putting that together. It wasn't even funny. So by all means, dig into that. I think that is March, April, May, June. So it'll be 4 hours or so of content there, which is great. Other questions, but thanks for asking about that, Dakota. I really appreciate you. All right.
Rob, this is Karina.
Yes.
Hi. Hey, thank you so much for putting this together. For me, it's really timely. I am about to start a podcast, and my whole focus has been, how do I use this to build relationships with people in my industry? And so you answered quite a lot of those questions. So really, thank you for doing that. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, because when you're the only one, right? Because I'm a founder, I'm a gerontologist, I'm a longevity architect. I'm trying to get the information that I have out to people because it's so important, but also wanting to collaborate with people in the industry who are already out there doing different aspects of it, so that I can bring much richer information about what is healthy aging and what do we need to be prepared for, with other people who are researchers and are doing some great stuff. And so I had not thought about having a kind of initial meeting with them. Instead, I was just going to go straight to the podcast, but I can now see the value of how important it is to have that. And then even to have a methodology for following up with them and really building that relationship. So thank you for that.
Of course. And that's not a small system either. I should make sure that I impart that to you too, is like, there's a lot of work that you're probably going to be going through, and Godspeed, Spider-Man. But it's the better you set up your pre and post, the better everything works, particularly the post. I'm so glad that the pre-interview thing landed with you, Karina, because there is something whimsically magical about meeting someone the second time. I can guarantee you that if you and I talk again in the near future, which I think we should, we should grab my meeting link out of there, out of that chat there, and please schedule something. But and the same thing would go for you, Jeremy. Here, I think if we met again down the line in the future, there would be this kind of like, there's a familiarity light up. I have thank you, Kate, for putting that in there. I have a 6-month-old son, and he's just starting to recognize people for the first time, and he has this little like, when he sees you and recognizes you, and that happens on an adult level too, which is fun. So it's great. There was one other thing I wanted to tap on for you, just to make sure. you said you're a gerontologist, correct? Which means you deal with the sciences of aging and how people handle that and things like that, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so I do aging, caregiving, and longevity.
I think I remember when I saw you register for this. I'm like, oh, that for some reason that stuck with me, like seriously. But the one thing
Oh,
that's interesting with your field is that you probably have colleagues out there who are across the spectrum of, like, some are really famous, some are not really famous, but you have the ability to use a podcast to sometimes bring the really famous ones into I always tell folks around this concept of a podcast is like a music venue. You might be a really nice independent music venue, and sometimes you can bring a big act into an independent venue and have a really cool acoustic show. That's where you also have the chance to elevate people from the other direction, from dive bar stages to a nice little indie venue. It's a step up where they're not going to be paid in hot dogs or brats, in my case from Wisconsin. But that's an opportunity too to look forward with your show as you develop it and figure out where you can find other audiences to incorporate into yours, because your topic is one that's a little bit outside of generally what, like, I deal with, like, again, a lot of software, B2B, big ticket items and things like that, because everybody gets old, like that's having hit 40 here
yeah.
this year, I'm like, oh, so your audience may be way wider than what, like, I normally work with. So I think that's an advantage to you, but also uh,
Yeah.
be mindful of how you pursue that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's probably why it's taken me so long to get to the point where I'm now ready to really start putting that guest list together and really start pursuing it and have the right concept, right? Because, I think you mentioned at the beginning that there was another episode where you talked about naming the podcast. And so I've gone through multiple names for the podcast and finally settled in a direction because, the name does dictate kind of where it goes. But for me, it is broader. Everybody's aging. Everybody knows somebody who's aging. We've all been aging since we were 0. So there are a lot of things that we need to know about this aging. And if we don't proactively plan for our aging and what we want to be able to do when we're 80, 90, then, we're kind of getting there by chance and probably
Right.
not in a very good shape. So I want to change that.
And I love that goal. I love that goal. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Something I'd recommend is
Yeah.
to do what my old sales trainer told me when I was selling insurance. In how you
Uh-huh.
sell insurance, Rob, take the best, leave the rest, the tactics. You may want to
Okay.
go see what's out there. What is out there for aging resources that are really cool on YouTube right now? What is
Uh-huh.
out there that's podcasts that ring and resonate with you? Take a second. You probably be doing, I'd say, a good 10, 20 hours of research for this,
Mm-hmm.
and find out what resonates with you. What's a cool thing that podcast ABC about aging does that you really like?
Uh-huh.
Concepts are not trademarkable, which is awesome. A lot of times you see it in
Right.
the video game industry where people try to, I think Nintendo just tried to copyright, like, catching Pokemon with the balls. It failed in court. You can't copyright a mechanic or things like that, which is interesting. So find the things that make you go, wow, about other stuff, and see how you can make a new soup from it, basically. I'm sorry, my analogies get a little distorted as
Mm-hmm.
we go on here, but how you can mix them together and bake something new that can go forward with that. And again, I wish you all the luck. I think your podcast is much more of a B2C, D2C, direct to consumer or business to consumer, which is a slightly different animal than I normally deal with. But if I can help in any way, 80
Yeah.
to 90% of the stuff is still the same. By all means, I'm an advice animal for you, which is great.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. And there is a lot of B2B because one of the best ways to catch people is through their employers, right? Or to catch them when
Oh,
they've been in hospitals and they're now being discharged, and now a family suddenly find themselves being a caregiver to an aging loved one that they had no plans and really don't even know. I mean, yes, you've known your mom forever, but do you really know what they like, how they like their coffee, the food they like, the things they're allergic to? What medical situations have they been in before, and so on. And so that's what I'm trying to solve, because what I see is when we're not prepared, one medical crisis becomes a generational financial crisis, and nobody's talking about that part of it.
You just made me think so much more. Like, my folks are coming to town this week, and I'm like, I don't know how mom takes her coffee. Like,
well, you may want to
blew my mind there, girl.
Oh, well, you may want to pick up a copy of the family care plan, because that's why I wrote it, is because so many people, when they think about, oh, what do I need to know to help mom and dad, or what do my children need to know to help me, then where do you start? What questions are important? You don't know what you don't know, right? And so that's why I developed the family care plan. It's just a workbook. It helps you go through, what people really need to know, and have a strategy and a framework to be able to do that. So I'm really excited about the future and what's coming, and how I may be able to help people, because that's the most important thing.
Well, keep at it. Keep me posted on what's going on with that, and see how that. Again, there's knowledge I have that can probably help. I think that it falls much more into a resource, at least from what I'm inferring here, is that your resource is very affordable for people. We're not talking, this is not a 6-figure investment for somebody to be coached from you, but I think there's definitely things to be taken from what was today that will help push you forward. So that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
awesome.
you.
Excellent.
I really appreciate
My pleasure,
it.
my friend. It's great to have you along. All right. We are at 1:15 already. Holy cow. Good for us. Any other questions? We'll do one more, and then we'll do our debrief with the folks who have been here so kind, helping to make this happen. Anything else before we dance on out of here? Tyrone or Nick? All right. Excellent. Well, ladies, gentlemen, everybody else, thank you. Have a spectacular rest of your day. We will be doing another one of these in July. It's all about the solo episode. So come on back for that. It'll be great.